Thank you very much, and good morning. Before we begin the public hearing, I'm going to make the following announcement. Due to the continuing threat to public health from COVID-19 and its variants, City Council committees are currently meeting remotely. We are using Microsoft Teams to make these remote hearings possible. Instructions for how the public may view and offer public testimony at public hearings of council committees are included in the public hearing notices that are published in the Daily News, Inquirer, and Legal Intelligencer prior to the hearing, and can also be found on phlcouncil.com. I now note that the hour has come. Mr. Christmas, will you please call a roll to take attendance? And members that are in attendance, please indicate that you are present when your name is called. Mr. Christmas?
Council Lady Bass. Council Lady Brooks.
Present.
Councilman Driscoll.
Present.
Council Lady Gaudier.
Present.
Council Lady Gilmore Richardson.
Good morning, Council President. Good morning, colleagues. I am present.
Good morning.
Councilman Harity.
I am present and accounted for.
Good morning.
Councilman Johnson. Councilman Jones.
Good morning, Mr. President, colleagues. Go Phillies.
Hello. Good morning.
Council Lady Lozada.
Good morning, everyone. I'm present.
Good morning.
Councilman O'Neill.
Good morning, everyone.
Councilman Phillips.
Good morning.
Councilman Squilla.
Good morning, Council President and colleagues. Present.
Councilman Thomas. Council Lady Vaughn.
Good morning, everyone. Happy Wednesday.
Good morning.
Council President Clark.
And good morning to all. Thank you. We've established a quorum of the committee. The hearing is now called to order. This is the public hearing of the Committee of the Whole regarding bills number 200253. Mr. Christmas, will you please read the title of the bill? Mr. Christmas,
Oh, yes, sir, I'm here.
please read the title of the bill.
Bill number 200253, amending section 20303 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Salaries of Specified Officers to establish salaries based on an annual compensation plan under certain terms and conditions.
Thank you very much. Before we begin to hear testimony from the witnesses we have today, everyone who has been invited to the meeting to testify should be aware that this public hearing is being recorded. Because the hearing is public, participants and viewers have no reasonable expectation of privacy. So by continuing to be in the meeting, you are consenting to being recorded. Additionally, prior to recognizing members for questions or comments they may have for witness, I will note for the record at this time that we will be used the chat feature available on Microsoft Teams to allow members to signify that they wish to be recognized. In order to comply with the Sunshine Act, the chat feature must only be used for that particular purpose. Mr. Christmas, will you please call the first witness to testify today? Excuse me, before you do that, somebody needs to mute themselves. We're hearing some background discussions. Thank you.
And also, Council President, I just wanted to note that for the record, I'm present. I had a technical difficulty.
Thank you,
Councilmember Phillips. Thank you.
Our first witness is Ms. Stephanie Tipton, Chief Administrative Officer.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Good morning, Council President Clark, Chair of the Committee of the Whole, Committee Vice Chair, Councilmember Jones, and the other members of the Committee of the Whole. My name is Stephanie Tipton. I am the Chief Administrative Officer for the City of Philadelphia. I'm here to testify in support of Bill number 200253. This bill proposes amending Section 20-303 of the Philadelphia Code entitled Salaries of Specified Officers to establish salaries based on an annual compensation plan under certain terms and conditions. I'll now summarize the key provisions of the bill. Bill number 200253 seeks to utilize an annual specified officers compensation plan to establish equitable, competitive salaries for city officers. The bill proposes a data-driven approach to create transparent salary ceilings for these positions. The current ordinance only allows for cost of living adjustments to salaries of the positions identified in the ordinance and sets caps on those salaries. This method fails to take into account any emergent changes in the labor market and in turn can limit the city's ability to compete effectively in the marketplace, since the adjustments can be out of alignment with industry standards for these critical positions. Conversely, the annual compensation plan proposed by the bill specifically outlines the reasons for the salary change, considers various market variables, and creates transparency around what our city leaders are being paid and why. The annual compensation plan's data-driven approach also aims to ensure that city leaders, in particular women and people of color, are compensated equitably and competitively compared with other peer cities across the country. Establishing these benchmarks can help the city retain top talent in its leadership positions. Bill number 200253 also seeks to correct a technical issue found in the Philadelphia Code. Currently, to increase an officer's salary above the cap, departments must also change an officer's title. This causes confusion and logistical challenges when trying to report on officer salaries accurately and responsibly. Finally, the changes outlined in the bill will work in concert with a comprehensive compensation review currently underway by the administration of our benchmark positions across city government. Together with the changes proposed by the bill, the city will be taking a holistic review of salaries at all levels of the organization. We have also offered 2 amendments to the original bill. The first adds newly created positions to the list of officers, and the second is a technical change that addresses how the cost of living language in the current ordinance would work under the newly proposed framework. I believe this bill will improve the city's ability to attract and retain top talent, and I respectfully request that the rules of council be suspended to permit first reading of this bill at the next session of council. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. This concludes my testimony. I'm happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Thank you very much, Ms. Tipton. I had a couple of questions referencing your testimony. You talked about a data-driven process, and particularly when you reference women and people of color. Explain that to me, the correlation between those two statements.
Sure.
And I guess because we've had, conversations over the years about actual implementation of goals.
Sure. So currently, under the ordinance, and as I mentioned in my testimony, when we want to, and the market necessitates us to increase a particular officer salary above what the cap allows for the current ordinance, we do have to appoint them into a different title, and then we also go about setting the salary. The salaries themselves are not always aligned across the board for like positions. Sometimes there is variance between certain commissioners and certain levels of officers across city government. And that can sometimes inhibit our ability to transparently say this is what we are offering, and make sure that there's equity and parity across all of the commissioner roles. What this plan would do is establish a very transparent way in which the salaries are set, and also make those salaries public so people would know ahead of time and know what those salaries are. And obviously we do that when we're doing the recruitment, but this would just allow us to do this on a regular basis to ensure there's equity and parity across the commissioner positions and the different officers here. So I think, I think there's plenty of research that shows that oftentimes women, people of color tend to, because there is lack of transparency sometimes around salaries, tend to sometimes get paid less. And so we want to make sure that doesn't happen. And that's, really why we're doing this in this fashion.
Okay, so under this process, and when there's a disagreement or basically a concern that what's suggested in the bill and the attempt to have an equitable approach across the board, particularly as it relates to women and people of color, that we don't see, we the general public or the council, don't see the implementation of that in actuality. How does that get addressed, since this now gives the authority to the administration without council's authorization to increase caps on salaries?
Sure. So what this would do is, if there is, let's just say the personnel director does the compensation plan on an annual basis, the mayor says, I think this person should be paid differently than what's here. That change would actually have to go to council, and council would have to be made aware of that. And so there is a mechanism in the bill to allow council to have some insight if there's something that's going to be outside of the plan itself.
Let me interrupt you 1 second. When you say
Sure.
the change has to go to council, what does that mean? You let us know, versus legislation?
Yes, sorry, I'm just pulling up we have to provide notice to council that we're doing that.
And then if council says we don't agree,
I'm sure there would be some kind of conversation around that, but we do have to provide notice to you that that's happening if something is outside of what the compensation plan has been set.
all right, I'm not sure I understand what that means, but I'm sure my colleagues will answer. I don't want to dominate the questioning, but I'm sure that there will be follow-ups on that. We are looking to do an amendment of the sunset provision, because at the end of the day, and first I want to thank you for working with council on providing opportunities and incentives and benefits to the general workforce. And I know you all, the next administration will be addressing that very shortly when municipal contracts come on. I want to thank you for your work on putting together the document. In understanding that I believe, at least I can speak for myself, the reason it supports is the challenges we realize as a result of trying to be competitive with the external workforce, which gets getting our butts kicked. I was talking to some folks in Harrisburg the other day, and they were just telling me how they're having challenges with the private sector in particular. So the conversation that there should probably be a sunset on this particular provision, to see how it's going over the next couple of years, and assuming that things are okay, we can continue. Well, they can. I won't be here, but the council and the new administration can continue along that path. So I just want to give you a heads up on that there probably be an interest in doing a sunset provision, to kind of look and see, because we're actually changing the nature of how this whole compensation strategy is done for high-ranking employees by removing council out of some aspects of that process. So just want to give you FYI on that.
Okay.
All right. Okay. I'll probably come back. There any questions of this witness by members of the committee? I think I saw a hand raised. Chair recognizes Councilman Jones.
Thank you, Mr. President. In another life, I was one of those administrators that probably could have qualified to be under this relaxed rules. But my ears perked up when you said give notice and maybe there'll be a conversation. Can we take a deeper dive into what is notice? And when you say a conversation, in cases where we might disagree, what are the remedies for that disagreement?
Sorry, I'm just pulling up the language of the actual ordinance here just to make sure I'm clear. So what the ordinance would allow for now is that if the mayor believes that the compensation plan does not provide for a competitive salary, they can revise the salary maximum, but they must provide written notification and justification to council. I don't want to speak on behalf of future administrations, but I suspect that we would, work with council if there is a disagreement, as we have in the past. And I think, in terms of setting salaries for positions, we have tried, especially over this administration, to do that in a way that is done fairly and regularly, where we're looking at the salaries. And certainly, if there's input that can be provided from other parties, we would be open to that and we would have that discussion. But certainly, we have to provide justification to council as to why we may be going in a different direction for a particular salary, especially if it's going over the maximum. I think what this does is it's not necessarily relaxing the rules. I think it just allows us to be a bit more responsive to changes in the marketplace. And it allows us to have a more formalized process than what is currently in place now.
So again, I understand the rationale. I understand what the city's up against. President Clark and Catherine Gilmore Richardson have been forward thinking in how we recruit and retain personnel. But going forward, the question still begs itself, what happens if we disagree? And my kids back in the day would say to me and justify, that it was time for their allowance to increase, but at least I had some input to say yes or no. And in this legislation, will we have the ability to disagree? And if we disagree, who is the final arbiter of that decision?
I think, up until this point, the mayor has retained the ability to, recruit their team and also pay them the salaries that are competitive for that position. I don't necessarily see a reason to move in a different direction than what is established here to allow the mayor the ability to recruit the team that they need around them to do the work that they have to do. But certainly there is at least a provision here that would allow us to have that notification go to council so you are aware of it and we can, have the discussion if necessary. But ultimately it is the mayor that, recruits and builds their team. I wouldn't want to necessarily take that ability away from future administrations necessarily.
So this is all for all non-civil service at-will employees?
No. This is only for specified officers. So there's certain officers that are specified currently in the code and charter. And so presently, those officer salaries, the way it was established, is established where there is a minimum and there is a maximum that cannot be, you can't go over that maximum for a particular position, even with the cost of living increases. And so, as you might imagine, those salaries are quite low. I mean, for some commissioners, the maximum salary is $100,000. And so, administrations, past and present, have had to, in order to ensure that they're recruiting the best folks possible. In some cases, we have to pay them more than what that cap allows. And so they have to be appointed into different positions so we can pay them competitively and get the team that we need, to do the work. So that's, currently how it's set out. But what we are doing now is we are also, as I mentioned in my testimony, doing a compensation review for all sort of benchmark positions. And we consider benchmarks like the positions that sort of set the salary scales for all other positions in city government. We're going to be concluding that compensation review soon. And so it is our intent that, moving forward, we do those types of compensation reviews on a more regular basis to ensure that we're not only looking at the highest levels of government, but we're looking across the organization and making sure that we're paying people competitively and fairly for the work that they're doing.
Well, I'm glad you said that, and I'm going to let it go because I know in our trades within the city of Philadelphia, we're having a hard time recruiting and retaining those kinds of electricians, plumbers, carpenters, because the private sector pays so much better. So I'm glad we're looking up and down the food chain to see where we can assist in retention and recruitment. Um, uh, Member Harity talks about all the time the billboard on I-95 that says, "Come down, be a police officer in Miami and live on the beach." So we are up against it. So thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you. Thank you, Councilman. Chair recognizes Councilwoman Gilmore Richardson.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Council President. And thank you and Councilmember Jones for your questions. And thank you, Ms. Tipton, for all of your work on the Special Committee for Municipal Retention and Hiring. We appreciate the work that we've been able to do in that committee and look forward to the implementation of some of the recommendations in the next year. I wanted to circle back specifically to the point that you talked about, because that's actually what I had a question regarding around how now, in order for the administration to have the ability to allow for higher compensation for some of the salaries of the specified officers, they have to place those positions technically in the system under a different position title. For the record for this hearing, if you would be able to specify from all the positions that are listed under section 20-303 and the ones that you all want to include, including the 4 that came to us yesterday in the form of the amendment, can you specify now which of all of those positions, and I think it's 25 total, currently have to go under a different or additional title in order to be paid, I guess, the salary that the administration would like to pay for that position? And in addition to that, you had talked about the comprehensive review of compensations across all of these specified officers and how you are also doing this across government. But I wanted to know if this review will be as comprehensive as the one that happened when the Home Rule Charter was initially instituted to ensure that all city positions were on par with the private sector so that the city had the ability to attract, retain, and maintain the very best of talent across government.
I can't speak to what was done originally with the Home Rule Charter, but we have retained a third party that is sort of skilled and has expertise in doing these types of compensation reviews. We have a few members of our staff internally who also support the work that this third party is doing. And so, they are going through a very rigorous process to look at the salaries, compare them against other benchmarks, also speaking internally with various stakeholders to understand, the current challenges with our salaries or pay to come to the final review. We have not done this in many years. And, my hope is between this bill and also us, completing this process, that this will be something in the future that we're doing more regularly. We certainly would like to, build up our capacity in-house to do this type of compensation review. I mean, it's sort of best practice, and a lot of large organizations have folks that do this kind of work regularly. And so, that is what we're hoping to do. On your first question, Councilwoman, I can get that information to you. I can make that available to the chair.
Okay, that would be great if you could send us that information as soon as possible by the end of the week,
Sure.
If possible, because that allows us to further understand also where there could potentially be any revenue gaps or additional dollars possibly available based on what the salaries may be established, for these specified officers. I just need to understand, based on when we look at the budget and we're reviewing the budget line by line, and all these positions are notated inside of the administration and or each said department, we need to understand where there will potentially be gaps after this, potentially this legislation would pass. You understand what the question is? Because some of them may have 2 titles those are 3. And so we
Yes,
just need to know where the other changes will be reflected line by
sure,
line in the budget.
certainly. We can do that.
Okay, and I just lastly just wanted to underscore the question that was presented by Council President Clark and Council Member Jones relative to understanding how council will have a role in this process, knowing that it is our responsibility to set forth a balanced budget on behalf of the city each year. Okay? All right, thank you
Yep.
very much. Thank you, Council President.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you, Councilwoman. Any additional questions by our members for this witness?
Oh, CP, I
Yes,
apologize. I have one additional question.
sure.
Thank you, Council President. In the amendment that was circulated yesterday regarding the public safety director position, the salary was already established for that position in the legislation. Can you speak to the inclusion of that specific position?
So including that position would allow us to also, so yes, there is a salary that's set in the ordinance that created the position. This would allow us, again, like with the other positions, to look and make sure that that salary is still competitive moving forward. So, I'd like to think that the salary is very competitive when we set it out, but the market is changing quickly, so we still want to make sure that we're also looking at that salaries too as part of this.
Yeah. Your council lady, actually, the ordinance established a minimum salary.
Right.
So we always had the capability as council to increase that number under the existing plan. But this now allows, if this particular bill passes, for the administration. My understanding that some people raised some eyebrows when that 265 was referenced in the bill, and I'm understanding that that's likely going to have to go up based on the recruitment for individuals for that particular position. There's a different kind of world out here.
It is. And sorry, my light keeps turning off. We also want to make sure that, future administrations have the flexibility to, again, recruit the best people for these roles, and, making sure that we can remain competitive with the salaries is a big piece of that. So.
Yeah, I'm sure that
No, I agree.
I'm sure the city council will be looking to do in a like-minded way to be able to recruit individuals to work here in council, because we have had some challenges over the last couple of years of hiring up on our staff levels. And we get people, particularly when we hire younger people, they tend to have a much shorter tenure than those of us old heads that kind of hang around and get pensions and stuff. That's seems to be a foreign word in today's world.
Yes.
So being able to capture. So okay, so there's no other questions. Want to thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Again, there will likely be an additional amendment on the sunset provision to just kind of get a sense of how this is working under this new strategy. But we'll reach out to you all as it relates to potential of an additional amendment.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any other witnesses on this particular bill today? No additional questions. With that, thank you very much for your testimony today. We'll be in touch. Thank you. All right. There being no further questions from the members of the committee and no other witnesses to testify, I would ask, is there anyone else present in this hearing whose name we have failed to call and who wishes to offer testimony on the bill being considered today? Hearing none, I want to thank all of the witnesses for their participation. We value your opinion. I now invite all witnesses to please disconnect from the hearing before we go into our public meeting. We'll now pause the proceeding briefly as multiple participants, i.e. one, leave the hearing. Thank you very much. And at this time, we will now go into our public meeting to consider the action to be taken on the bill before the committee today. We will now convene the public meeting. Mr. Christmas, will you please call the roll to take attendance, and members that are in attendance, please indicate by simply saying Present or aye.
Council Lady Bass. Council Lady Brooks.
Present.
Councilman Driscoll.
Present.
Council Lady Gaudier.
Present.
Council Lady Gilmore Richardson.
Good morning, Council President. Good morning, colleagues. I am present.
Councilman Harity.
Present.
Councilman Johnson. Councilman Jones.
Present.
Council Lady Lozada.
Good morning, everyone. I'm present.
Councilman O'Neill.
Present.
Councilman Phillips.
Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, viewing public. Present.
Councilman Squilla.
Morning, colleagues and Council President, present.
Councilman Thomas. Council Lady Vaughn.
Present.
Council President Clark.
President, thank you very much. We will now go into our public meeting. The chair recognizes Councilmember Jones for a motion on the amendment to Bill number 200253.
Now, Council President, pardon me, Councilman Jones, I just wanted to note that we have circulated the new amendment, which adds in a 2-year sunset provision. So that's the amendment that has been circulated that you now have and that we are now considering.
Okay, so that's so is that included in the earlier? It's just one amendment, right?
No, all of the amendments are in one document, the new amendment.
Thank you. Cool. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Christmas. Quick work.
You can start over, Councilman Jones. You were about to, yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Christmas. Thank you, Mr. President. I offer an amendment to Bill number 200253. A copy of that amendment has been circulated to all members of the committee. I move for the adoption of the amendment to Bill number 200253. Be approved.
Second.
Thank you. Chair no said Councilman Squilla. Second the motion. It's been moved and properly second that the amendment to Bill number 200253 be approved. All in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
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 Those
Aye.
opposed? Ayes have it. Motion
Aye.
carries and the amendment to Bill number 200253 has been approved. The chair again recognizes Councilmember Jones for a motion on Bill number 200253 as amended.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move for the adoption to Bill number 200235 as amendment be approved by this committee, and that the rules of council be suspended to permit next reading of this bill at our next session of council.
Second.
Chair no set Councilman Squilla seconded the motion. Has been moved and properly seconded. Bill number 200253 as amended be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation at our next session of council. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
Aye.
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 Ayes have it. The motion carries and Bill number 200253 as amended will be reported from this committee with a favorable recommendation with the rule suspension at our next session of council. That concludes the business before the committee of the whole today. Thank you all very much for your participation and your attendance. Thank you.
Good job, Mr. President.
Hey,
Thank you all. Go Phillies.
Thank you, Mr. President.
Go Phillies.
Have a great day.
Go Phillies.
Hey,
Yeah.
let's not forget about the Eagles. Go Eagles.